familiar. So if you don't know by now, then you should probably get familiar.
Alright, so this has taken me forever to actually get up because for some reason my microphone wasn't working, and then when I got that working a bunch of other things weren't, and so now everything should be working fine. So today we're going to be going over GSC, but using Infinity Loader. So there's a couple of reasons why Infinity Loader is a good compiler, mostly because it supports MW2 and 3. If you do not have time for Infinity Loader, I suggest you guys boost the server to get a trial. You get 5 days for every boost. And just give it a try, see if you guys like it. And if you do, I really suggest you buy it, because it is a very, very good tool, and it's very helpful with modern day modding. So today we're going to be doing a tutorial on basic functions, explaining how the syntax of C or GSC works, so that you guys understand how to write code, how to look for errors, and things like that. Most of the time, the compiler itself will immediately alert you of any syntax errors. For example, if I remove this colon here, although I think this is right only. Yeah. So if I go in and create a new project, which we're going to do anyway, YouTube tutorials. Make sure my stuff is working. Okay. So let's say I remove this semicolon right here. It'll show there's an error over here in the file. And when you go to click inject, it will tell you there's an error, and then you click check syntax, and it will put you right at the line after where your error is. So you should look around there just to see if there's any errors. When you're going through and creating functions, you want to follow this, I guess you could say, well, it's how C is written, but it's GSC is written the same way. So a function name, example would be function name, and then you need these parentheses. The reason you want these is because if you have any parameters like variable, argument, value, input, etc. So this would be like input from the function when it's threaded or called, which I will explain later. So then after that, you want to do two, I believe they're called brackets, I don't really know, but you want two of these brackets here, and then inside of this is going to be where your script will go. So we're going to do self I_println, and then we're going to do test. So now if I remove these inputs because they're totally useless, and right here where it says welcome message, we're going to remove that and type self function name. Now notice I don't have the word thread written here, and I'll explain that in a moment. So what I'm going to do is remove all this bloat from IL. I know that they have special global chaining that you don't normally have with GSC, but they took the time out of their day to do it. I just personally don't need it for this tutorial, as we're focusing mainly on normal GSC. So anyways, so there's a difference between threading a function and just calling the function, and I'll explain that in a minute when we go over for if loop statements, basically. So let's inject and start a match. Okay, so you can see on the bottom left it says test. Now we'll end the game and go back to Infinity Loader. Alright, so now if I do thread, what threading does is continues code. So say, or this runs in the background essentially. So this function will run in the background while the rest of the code can continue. So say you do a loop. While 1 basically means it's infinite. It will never stop unless you want it to stop. We are not going to stop it because I'm just going to end the game. So let's just make random int. Oh, I don't know how to explain that, so I'm not going to do that yet. So we'll just make it red. And we'll do wait 0.2. So now I threaded that function name. And let's go ahead and start. Okay, so now it's going to sit there and spam test repeatedly, and that would never stop. So now let me put in a button monitor really quick. I'll explain a lot more button monitoring later, but for now I'm just using it to demonstrate threading. So we're going to do self end on death, or you could use while in this example too, but I prefer for. And we're going to do if self ADS button pressed, and we'll do self thread I'll do self function name if self melee button pressed self thread function type. I'm just doing type for the purpose of the video. It's entirely different. So now if we just do that and then function type, and I'm literally gonna write or put the exact same function in here, and you'll see the difference. Self iprintln and we'll do test, but we're gonna make this bold just so that it pops up on top. And wait 0.2. Now let's start. Oh, hang on, let me thread this really quick. I'm threading button monitor so that button monitor will run in the background the whole time. Okay. So now if I aim, oh. Gonna add a weight in there, and so thread button monitor. Okay. This video might end up kind of long, so I apologize, but I'm trying to explain things in detail. Okay, so as you can see, the word test is there, and now if I melee, which is what would normally pop up the middle one, it's not going to happen, and that test there is going to run infinitely, so I cannot use any other function. I can't aim to do that thread again, nothing will happen. And that was using the function here, ADS button press, the function name. That was the one that prints on the bottom left. So now if I reverse that and I do melee button pressed first, if I knife, I'll show you really quick. Okay, as you can see, it's spamming test, and then I can right click and it will also do the other function. But now I can't do any other functions until that test on the bottom left would stop, and it's an infinite loop. So basically, if you're doing a function that you want to run in the background, or you want to continue doing the rest of your code first, you should always do thread. If it's a quick function like setting origins, you would do self set origin, and then whatever you use to store the origin. You could do that, and that would work fine. But if you were to do God mode or unlimited ammo or anything like that, you should do self thread. In most cases, the menu itself will have a function there that'll look like this. it'll be like player thread, or well, self, and then function and var. So that's essentially what a function should look like in a good mod menu. You would have use button pressed. If self use button pressed, self thread func, and then input 2, input 3. And that's ideally how you would thread a function. So in most cases, it's going to thread regardless of whether or not you are doing it anyway if you're doing it inside button monitoring. But if you were to do it like on player spawned, right here, this thread, if I change this to button monitor, and then do self iprintln, past monitor, oh, right, okay. So as you guys can see, just on infinity order tells you the error right away. Now let's inject. This is my best way to explain. So if I don't thread this button monitor, that iprintln will never happen. So if I spawn in, because I don't have it threaded, it never says to do anything. And then I also can't use the E because I just aimed. So I guess that's enough of explaining loops and threads and stuff like that. Well, not loops, but we'll go over that in a second. So the next thing we're going to talk about is if statements. And let me remove this button monitoring again real quick so I can explain it. Alright, so an if statement would be, I mean, it sounds just like it is. So if something is true, or if something is equal to something else, then do this. So for example, if self ADS button pressed, which means the game is going to check if you're aiming down sights or your ADS button is pressed, and then we're going to do self iprintln, you are aiming. And we can also do a condition. So if you're aiming and self dot aimed already, that exclamation point at the beginning just basically means false. If you remove it, it means true. You can do equal equals like this as well, or false. But to save code, we're going to do that exclamation point. And then we'll do self.aimed already equals true. So, and then in here, if self melee button pressed and self ADS button pressed and self aimed already. So what this is going to do is self iprintln bold, and let's type alright, so now let's start the match, or thread this button monitor again. So thread button monitor, and let's start the match. And let's go ahead and go to the intervention. Alright, so now if I knife, nothing's going to happen. If I shoot, nothing will happen. But if I aim, it will tell me I'm aiming once and then not again, because we set aimed already to true after we aimed immediately. So now if I aim and knife, it'll say you aimed and knifed, and then it won't do that again. I mean, it will because I have a running loop, so aiming and knifing with aiming is going to do that, but that's not I don't know how to explain that. Okay, so if I aim a knife, it'll say I aimed a knife. If I aim, it will tell you I'm aiming, and then I have to aim a knife for it to go back. This is also how opening and closing menus work. They'll check a variable and see whether or not it's true or false as to whether or not buttons are monitored. Alright, and so another example that we're going to have to go over is return. Not that most people ever really use it, but it's helpful if you want to do a check for a name. So we're going to do a name check really quick. Name check. And let's do if self.name equals Leafeist. And then we don't need to do brackets in this case. So you would do return true, else. Well, you don't need else actually, you can just do return false. So the reason for that, even though, I mean, there's good standing, but I'm again showing you how to shorten code, is so basically if my name is equal to Leafeist, it will return true. And so here, we're going to write if self name check equals true. Well, you can do if self name check like this, which is what we're going to do just to save code space. And then put this here. And this there. Push this out. I always recommend indenting because it makes life so much easier. We want to keep this loop here, counter going on the outside, and let's start the match. So now what it's going to do when I spawn in is check to see if my name is equal to Leafeist, or else it'll return false. So else and for the purpose of the video, we're going to do an X right there. And let's start the match. So as soon as I spawn, it should just spam and say you aren't Leafeist because that's not my name. Which means it's returning false right here. Which means it did not pass this if statement check, so it didn't return true. Now if I just do Leafeist, and I spawn in, everything works just fine. I can do the aiming and say it's you're aiming, and then aim a knife, and it'll say you aimed a knife, yada yada yada. So that's how you do an if statement. There's more complicated ways to do it, like you can do distance, but we're gonna do that in a much further video down the road. So what did we cover? Returns, if statements. Loops are kind of easy. It's just while, so you can do while one, or like while self dot name equals Leafeist. So basically you can set while to mean while something, while is essentially an if statement for a loop. So instead of doing if, you could do while name check is true, which would basically check as long as this is returning true. So say you change your name in game, it would then go false, and whatever this loop was would no longer work. I don't suggest doing verification with names because that won't work very well, but that's the easiest way to explain that. So I guess we can go over strings and globals, but I don't know. Maybe that'll be the next video. Yeah, this video is 20 minutes long. Alrighty, so I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial, and I hope this was helpful. I'm not very good at it, so, well, I mean, I'm good, but not good at explaining things. So if you guys have any questions, leave a comment, and I'll make sure to try to help you guys out. So thank you for watching, and peace.